you didn't remember who I was, I'm J.Gold. I think you may have seen me a little while ago, and I'm honored to have a couple of participants with me for this Fireside chat. Christine, of course, Kincaid. Many of you who've been here before know Christine. She's been here with us a few times, which is great. Welcome back.
Thank you.
She's the Chief Security Architect, I want to make sure I get this right, of SecureChannels. And Rich Blech, CEO of SecureChannels. Welcome.
Thank you.
So this is going to be a discussion, a brief discussion, but hopefully we'll be able to carry it on later, about security and what security means when we talk about disruptive technology, when we talk about all the kinds of things that are coming in mobile and beyond mobile, IoT, what we're calling EOT, the enterprise of things that's much more concentrated on what enterprises need. And I'm going to throw a couple of questions out here just to get us started, but we'd really love to get questions from the audience. So if you've got questions that you'd like to ask, please raise your hands or yell or throw something. We really can't see you behind these lights, but somebody in the audience will let us know that you've got a question, and then we can go there. If you don't do that, then you're going to force me to ask all the questions. You may not like that. But let me just throw out a couple, and let's just get the discussion started. So, disruptive technology it can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, but it's mobile and it's other things, it's wearables, it's devices, it's sensors. Is mobile and disruptive and secure in the same sentence really an oxymoron, or is it real?
Well, I and Christine will have her point of view on it, but I think coming from a security company perspective, it is an oxymoron in a way because, innovation, pioneering, like we heard about yesterday, is not really thinking of security in mind. And even when it does, it minimizes it because you want to keep innovating to create these efficiencies and better user experiences. And with that come the pratfalls that are going to be there, leaving exposures to these very clever, sophisticated hackers that will get in and find the attack vectors to get into whatever has been newly innovated. So from a security company perspective, we always have to think, let's find ways to fill those holes as much as possible. But it always does come down to best practices, and best practices is this layered solution that's ends up being forced on us as users. And that doesn't always make pioneering and efficiency, user experience work well with security. But we as a security company have to think to do that and find ways to do that as best as possible.
Right, and to the same point, what we heard just a few moments ago is rapid application deployment often means security is what you think of after it's out there, whether or not you find out it's usable. Where's the value, and then where's the risk? So sometimes security in a disruptive technology space or a rapid technology space is coming after the fact, but it's actually running alongside. You need to know that something is valuable to your company and people will use it. You need to know that innovative, disruptive, new technology is going to work and provide value to either your consumer approach or to your internal business, and then you can look at, okay, so then how do we secure it? And it really does, I think, disruptive technology as a whole drives technology innovation, whether it's in the security space or even in just the functionality space.
So, and you raise a great point around security and security in devices and in things. In the past, many companies have thought about security kind of as an afterthought. I go out and get a thing, I go out and get an application, I go and get whatever I'm going to do, and then, I forgot security. Have we moved beyond that? Are we seeing companies, I know some companies clearly have, but is there enough emphasis today on security kind of as a full partner, full component within the overall scheme of things?
I think that in some enterprises, you're definitely seeing that security is more in lockstep with that type of stuff, but then there's still different areas of business that sort of lag behind that have traditionally thought, it won't happen to me. Right. I don't have data that's at risk. I don't collect customer PII, so that doesn't apply to me. And what they're finding out from their cyber insurance agencies is it's a little bit more complicated than that. And cyber insurance is really driving more security innovation and security being part of the internal process of how they do business every day, purely from an insurance standpoint. If they want to do business and they want insurance on their business, cybersecurity is actually a requirement now. So we're seeing a shift in that, but we're also seeing folks that aren't sure how to approach it either. And we have to get away from the traditional security says no, instead of let's help you figure out how to do that.
And some of that can be done by making, at least for the user, security a little bit more interesting or fun for the user experience. That's some of the innovations that we're behind at SecureChannels is making the use of security more interesting or fun to deploy for the consumer user. At the enterprise, there's just no excuse. I mean, enterprise is up to them to follow best practices and have a layered security solution and make sure that everyone stays within those confines.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've seen a shift in the way that users authenticate, move to biometrics. We're seeing a lot of innovation in that space. That is much more user-friendly and more acceptable. I think the pushback with fingerprints was, well, people didn't want to give away their identity. Well, now we're giving them the option to use their voice, use their photograph, choose pictures or patterns or other things, and it makes it more interactive. It's a little bit more user-intuitive for some generations and for different folks, and I think it makes them more inclined to use security because it's not me having to remember a 26th or 27th password and remembering the complexity and keeping track of it.
It's no problem. You have those yellow sticky notes on your wall with all the passwords
Exactly.
on them,
So,
right?
but I mean, it's innovation driving a shift in the industry to create security, but do it in a way that's a lot more user consumable.
Yeah. And I think that's key, right? If security gets in the way, I'm going to find a way around it.
Exactly.
If security is transparent, it can't be completely invisible because you're still going to have do something, whether it's an eyeball scan or voice or whatever. But if it doesn't get in my way, I'm much more apt to put up with whatever you make me do than if it takes me 20 minutes to figure out what my password is. We've gone through this, so we've gone through phases of security, right? I mean, we started with login as an identity, which was name and password. Now we're moving to biometrics and moving to lots of other different methods of multi-factor authentication. But as we move to the world of things, whatever those things are, whether it's your car or it's a watch or it's a refrigerator or it's a machine tool or whatever it's going to be, many of those don't really have a lot of processing power built in. They don't have a lot of overhead. How do we secure that world when we're barely able to do what we need to do with the more powerful devices?
Well, we're seeing a lot of research in the space where we're taking multiple points of reference and creating a referential risk profile for users. So some of those Internet of Things, those small wearable sensors, I mean, it could be geolocation, it could be picking up that there's a pulse for a particular user or a pattern. We've seen a Fitbit save somebody's life because it held heart rate information, and they were able to pull that up at a hospital and realize that somebody was having a critical issue and use that information for good. There's also, of course, that flip side of worrying that it could be used for ill as well. And we're seeing a lot more enterprises enhance the user experience with machine IDs and referential information, looking at a couple of different pieces of information, bringing that together to go, yeah, I trust that this is John Smith, somebody that works for my company working from home today, and making that log-on experience, that trust experience a little bit easier. I think we're going to see more innovation in that space, maybe even at the circuitry level.
And I would also say that it's all about design and architecture and implementation, not having all the critical sensitive data in one place. It's spread out. So that Fitbit information, for example, yes, that's critical to the actual user, but let's not make sure all the PII is in one place, that it's spread over, and that only the authorized, authenticated person has access to that.
Excellent. Are there any, let me break here for a minute, if there are any questions in the audience, do we see any? Like I said, I can't see any.
I can't see anybody
Okay.
either.
Well, we'll continue.
I see lights.
Yeah, I see
So
lots of lights.
we're interested, like, I think there's a definition of what's disruptive technology is an open-ended question. What's disruptive to one part of the industry might be not as disruptive to the other part. I think Apple's iPhone moving into the space really kind of kicked that off, and it started things in like this, sort of event kind of rolling forward as more consumer mobile devices became ubiquitous ways of entering the enterprise. And, we're now seeing BYOD in almost every industry. We're seeing mobile app development, ways of interacting with their employees, their staff, using those devices without having to go out and buy new hardware. Makes their business models more flexible, but it also can make things more difficult for their ability to secure their environment.
Well, and that brings up an interesting consideration. I've talked to a number of companies who, when we invariably, after we talk about the device and then the application, we start down the path of security. And many companies tell me that, we really are spending way too much money on security. We're not sure that we're getting the payback that we should. Should we be paying more? Should we be paying less? Or should we just be able to do it more efficiently?
I definitely think that the security industry as a whole needs a better way of validating its value. If they're going to invest millions of dollars in a solution, and I think we've just recently seen a couple of events where that value add was really questioned, which is what cyber insurance is really about. But a company goes through a breach, they hire somebody to come in and help them mitigate that breach, only to find out 6 months later that it was actually not mitigated and they were still being breached.
And beyond that, it's just look at all the examples out there. It starts out, we hear about LinkedIn breach a couple of years ago, and now it comes out that it's much worse than expected. OPM, it's much worse than expected. The numbers go up on the amount of or the seriousness of the breach. So, you have to ask yourself a valuation question when you get into that area of concern. Is the security worth it? Well, look what the cost is when you don't have it.
And the largest breaches are not people breaking down your wall and crossing your perimeter with guns ablaze and making lots of noise. They're quietly sneaking in the back door and then quietly watching. The value is in the information they have access to, and they're making money off of inside information about different parts of an industry and then using that information to legally move funds in the stock markets and in the fiscal markets to know where trends are coming before other people in the public sector know. And that's really the result of that type of infiltration, and they're quiet.
Yeah, and OPM, that was biometric data that was breached, and we don't even realize all the effects of that. It'll be years to come before that's all realized.
And in fact, I've seen a number of statistics. It depends on which ones you're looking at, but the average breach in a corporation is not detected for 6 months. So that means people are in there for 6 to 9 months or a year doing whatever they want to do with that data. And that's actually pretty scary that it takes that long to find something.
And it is pretty frightening because you're talking about a malicious insider who's using authorized credentials. And they have all the time in the world to go from one set of credentials to the next set of credentials to get deeper and deeper into your organization. And sure, you might find the initial set of credentials that they breached, but they've breached 3 deep beyond that, and that's the ones that remain undetected. So it's definitely a scary space, and we heard the statistic, almost every company probably is breached and doesn't know it. Unfortunately, I think that might actually be a more truer state.
Yeah.
It's very true, and it's, to me it was, when we did that survey, it was appalling to find out how many people thought they'd never had a breach. It's just amazing to me, but that's okay.
Well, hopefully it'll drive some more innovation, and we'll see some new startups, we'll see some new solutions come out of the industry in the next 6 months or a year or 18 months. And we'll all start to figure out better ways to secure environments, whether it's, the Internet of Things and wearables or large enterprise.
It really is a volley, serve and volley between the good guys and the hackers. Just imagine the analogy with a Hollywood movie, it always starts out with a surprise explosion. The good guy comes in to assess the situation, and then he goes back and creates, this won't happen again, and then in the middle of the movie, there's the next big explosion, caught off guard, and then they solve it again, and before the credits roll, surprise, the bad guy's still alive. So we're just back and forth constantly with good and evil.
Let me try the audience again. Oh, I think there's a question up here. There might be some in the back.
Hi. So this seems to be obviously the technology is growing much faster, and a lot of innovation is going on. And it always feels that security is trying to catch up You know, because it seems like the hackers are actually innovating much faster than the security industry. So why is that? I mean, why the security always feels like a catch-up rather than...
It's
you know,
hard to
it's-
convince companies to spend money to redesign, redevelop, or apply security because there's a lot of continuing obscurity is my security. So if it's new, there's no, until it happens, it doesn't get attention, unfortunately. It's the same with any industry, technology not being the only one. Seatbelts weren't put in cars until we had clear data that as cars sped up and they got bigger, that it was killing people when they were in crashes, and safety belts could save their lives. They could have been engineered and put into cars decades before they were, but it takes time. Sometimes, unfortunately, we have to stub our toe quite a few times before we realize we need to stop doing something.
Yeah, and further to your point of the question is why the hackers, not only are they sophisticated, they don't care about FIPS 140-2. They don't care about best practices. They don't have rules to follow. They have their own set of rules, and they are working 24/7. They're well funded. They're spread out all over the world, and they have their own network.
Sometimes it's just the glory of being the
Yes.
first one to say, I did it too.
Correct.
And there's real monetary incentive for those
Exactly,
folks to go off,
exactly.
because if they steal a lot of data, they're walking away with a couple of $1 million or more.
Correct.
Yep.
I think we're going to have to cut it. I think we're out of time. I want to thank the panelists.
Thank you.
Christine, Rich.
Thank you.
very much for a great discussion, and they'll be around later, so if you have questions, we can follow up.
All right,
Thank
thanks.
you.